You're listening to the Valley Current.
Hey, look at you. Look at you, Andrew.
Hey, Jack.
You're looking thin, man.
Gotta keep up with the Russos.
You look really thin. What are you doing? You got a big watch on. That must be an athletic triathlete watch.
My son sent me a video of his first rescue. It is crazy. I'll send it to you.
What happens in a rescue?
He's the rescue swimmer in the Coast Guard. He went on his first deployment. It's amazing. I beg your pardon. It's actually a simulation, but you can't tell till the basket gets up to the helicopter. So he's the guy that rappels down into the cliff, and it's just crazy. I am doing a lot of yoga and a lot of cardio and eating very healthy. But you, speaking of losing weight, I think you're fine. You're losing it too. I'm not finding it. Maybe
I got to get another 40 pounds off, and I'll be back to what I was like in first year of law school. I got a great.
What are you down to?
I like to get down to like 195 or 190, ideally.
What are you? 6'4", 6'5"?
6'4".
Yeah, that's. What you want? 210 right now?
I got a lot of muscle mass.
No, you're a big man. You carry it well, but that's good.
I've got really big calves, because I do a lot of biking, and there's a lot of muscle. My BMI is actually pretty good, pretty low relative to the weight, comparatively speaking. But they're like people that have BMIs of under 20. And I don't know how your BMI is probably.
I don't know either, but I'm really proud of you. You signaled that 5,000 week thing. I've taken it to a new level as it relates to jobs. Check it out. Oh, fantastic!
Margot's joining.
Margot.
The author is in the house.
Yeah, right.
The author is in the house. The book out. I got chapter 12 and read it, and I thought it was great.
You did. The book's been out for a year, but I did not know all the things I needed to do to really promote it. So I'm just, this is the story of my life. I'm a day late and a dollar short on everything, but I am rebirthing the book. And I've met with a new publisher today who actually knows how to do marketing. So
you should do stand-up comedy. You should, because you have a lot of presence, and you could have a stand-up comedy YouTube channel that just generically talks about all the wacky people you meet.
Oh yeah, that would be fun. Maybe I'll do that for my regular business,
including me and Andrew. You could tell some good stories.
Yeah,
about me and so tell us about how. Let's just do a few questions, and then Andrew, I'm going to ask you to comment. How'd you get the idea for doing the book? Because you have had a consulting practice for quite a while. And when I met you, you were doing an app that was going to seriously change the way HR worked. And I think you got pretty far along that line, but maybe you'll tell us how that derailed or rerailed or wherever it went, because I think you are kind of the subject matter expert for someone who wants to do an app, but you are actually doing an app. And Andrew, of course, is the technology guru with his partner on how to build a whole suite of apps that change the way people do HR throughout Silicon Valley and the world. But give us some comments about how you decided to kind of do the book, because it's not really about AI or an app. It's really about culture, right?
Yeah. So the same reason I wanted to build the app was to elevate how people contribute at work. And so with HR, a big frustration for them is they want to help, they want to serve, and they've got all these hiring managers who want to do everything the way they do it. And then you have 50 or 80 or 300 people doing things. So it's like the wild, wild west to how people get hired. And then when they want to fire them, then they go to HR to fix the problem. So as you know, the deal derailed, and I actually have I know I wasn't supposed to talk about it, but it's been a long time ago, so now I have a keynote about it. It's called Walk, Don't Run. Anyhow, but all the names will be never be said. So can you guys still hear me? Something weird's happening with the phone.
I'm just putting the book up because the name of the book is Ignite. Of course, it's not there.
Ignite Culture, right? So if you look there today, we have 61 positive ratings. So that's nice.
Really good, and they're really high ratings. I mean, 4.5 stars is hard. Like that's pretty hard to have. It's hard to have anything above 4. And
it's hard to get people to review the book.
Very high ratings. And you got an Audible audio book unabridged too, which I hope you speak. Are you the one who speaks the Audible?
I am. What does unabridged mean?
That means that you put every word in. You haven't cut any word out. So you got Ignite Culture, empowering and leading a healthy, high-performance organization from the inside out. You got an Audible, which is how I lose weight because I have the earphones and I bike and I listen to Audibles and I knock out like 3 books a week because I do a lot of biking. And 3 books a week, 7-8 hours per book, 24 hours of bike riding a week at least, if I think of the totals. And when it's in the author's voice, I think it's the best because you put the inflection in it, which is really important. So, to my way of thinking, this is the kind of book that anyone that wants to do HR in a grand way should do. But tell us more about how you decided to kind of do it, because you were doing the app that kind of derailed. And I think that probably was a good thing for you, right? As it turned out.
Yeah, I wish Kai May was on this call because she just interviewed me about this. And she said it seemed like it was spiritual intervention that happened. And I think it was, because my original reason for coming out to Silicon Valley was to work with CEOs and the people closest to them so that they could really have the kind of company that they intended on creating when they started. And then, things happen and you're like trudging along, just trying to get shit done. Right. So the book is an amalgamation of many of the clients I've worked with in my first 10 years post recruiting. And we talk about, really, I just did a book synopsis a few days ago, and it's how when we overuse our greatest strengths, like, I'm a cheerleader and I'm a go-getter and I'm going to jump off the cliff and go into business with the wrong guy, how you can overuse your strengths and then they wind up eating you alive and eating the people that you work with alive. And so there's story after story in the book of people like Sam Smith or people like Harry or Tom, where their greatest strengths became their biggest nightmares because they were, instead of bringing people along, they were separating people from the organization. And like right now, today, everything that you're seeing with polarization politically, socially, financially, that's what's happening in all these companies. And there's a mass amount of people like now that want to do what Andrew and I do. Like they think the answer is, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And they have no idea what they're up for, which is going to be another book. But Ignite Culture was written to democratize, just like the app was supposed to do, how people can do this for themselves.
So that's that's an interesting insight, because sometimes, and I see people all the time that are down in the dumps because they're being sued or they've been taken advantage of. They want to file a lawsuit. They think the courts are going to solve the problem. And I often say to them, the kick in the pants that you get that represents that roller coaster ride where you're kind of going downhill, that's a good thing. It causes the sort of motion that you need to ignite the next stage of your success. So oftentimes when you see people who have been fired, you see people that are upset with their partners, a million different scenarios where people are down in the dumps. You have to sometimes look at that as an instigator of change. And that change can cause some amazing things to happen. And, we don't right now have the right culture in many corporations to recognize that taking advantage of that energy that happens when people are like knocked off their pedestal it's such an amazing energy. And at some point, Andrew, you will figure out the tech stack that's going to somehow measure that and get people to take advantage of it, because you guys are trying to get talent in the door and you use technology. I want to tell you one story before I ask you to comment on what Margaret's done, because I know you read her book. I got this one-page resume in the mail. It was so funny. In postal mail. I didn't open up the postal mail. Someone opened up the postal mail for me, read one page. And the guy had at the bottom of the page, it's a lawyer, he read at the bottom of the page, I've done a number of comedy skits which have been performed on Saturday Night Live and Dave Letterman. And the person who read this for me said, you got to interview this guy. He's done some stand-up comedy and therefore he must be good on his feet. And I thought to myself, one-page resume, it's not a very exciting resume anywhere else until that very last line. It's like line 26 on the 26-line page. It's funny. That one line caught the attention. And I say to myself, would your scanning systems that you use, whatever they're called, that scan these resumes and try to find stuff, do they actually figure out line items like that, Andrew?
Yeah, they do. But I'll tell you what's still true, and this is why Margaret makes mad money, is employers are not good at hiring people. They're just not. I was just doing a video for this YouTube channel for candidates saying, you can't rely on the system. You have to, I mean, the game's the same, but the players have changed. And Margaret knows this as well as anybody. They got the HRTA infrastructure, and so the hiring team is hamstrung, and then the candidates suffer. But yeah, what you're saying is true.
And there's a lot of change in Silicon Valley. I mean, I think the average stay for most engineering folk is like under 3 years now, right? Isn't it?
Jack, I just read this. 4 years. And then I wanted to get to that with your 5,000 weeks. 90,000 hours the average person spends in their work, over the course of their lives. 90,000 hours.
Right.
But it's 4 years and dropping.
Yeah.
So I just read I got a really funny email, and it said, breaking news. All candidates lie on their resume. And I cracked up. When I got that breaking news was 1983.
Right.
It was the first thing I learned in recruiter training. TAL. They all lie.
But it's really gotten worse, hasn't it? Like, I think in a way the epitome of it was Elizabeth Holmes, and then she got trumped by SPF. In some ways, Sam Bankman-Fried, who's now in jail, Elizabeth Holmes now in jail, Sunny Balwani now in jail. Like, there's like this race to see who can outlie the biggest liar in the planet, and it's sad in a way, isn't it?
Well, yeah. Well, I don't know. Just take a look at what's going on in our world. You get paid a lot of money to lie, and you get away with a lot to lie. And then you could say you're persecuted just like Jesus Christ was. And people listen.
Right. But Andrew, are the systems getting better at detecting? Because I think they can do a lot of cross-checking, right? Can't they? Like, for a lawyer, you can do a lot of cross-checking. Like, you can look up their bar number, their disciplinary record, their law school record. Like, you can get a lot of data. It's there if you have the search tools to do it, or you have some automation to do it, right?
Yeah. Have either of you seen this app called Lazy Apply? What it does is it takes your LinkedIn profile or your resume and it parses it up, and then it runs it through a series of algorithms, and then it shotguns that to all the job boards and all the ways to apply. And it's just terrible. Talk about misinformation. It's just clogging up the system, because a lot of the employers don't want more applications, whether they're legitimate or illegitimate. It's like it just clogs up the system. So Everyone's trying to leverage technology to drive efficiency, but it's backfiring to each
So
of our
Margret,
points.
when you go into a client account, because the book will lead to probably more consulting clients, and when you go in, they must be saying to you, can you help us figure out how to find the best people? We've got all these tools, we've got the tech stack, we've got the ability to kind of segregate. What do you say to them when they throw at you, we just are not getting the quality talent that we want to get. We're just not getting it at the level that we'd like to get it, or they're not agreeing to join.
Yeah.
It's not just about money. It's not just about money anymore, right? You got to do a lot more than just money, right?
Yeah. Usually they don't come to me with a recruiting problem. They come to me because they have a retention problem. They have really good people that have said, I cannot deal with this craziness or this friction inducing work environment, or it's too stressful. So usually there's a pain. Either they've lost a couple, not just one, but a couple or more really strong people, or there's people saying, I can't work here anymore, or they have customer issues or quality issues. So I get them when they're even deeper in pain than I have a recruiting issue. Although it's a great point, Jack, because the very first indicator that you have a problem is that you can't get the right people to say, I do. That's the first indicator. And if people, especially if people are coming in, interviewing, meeting with the people, taking time, and then saying, yeah, no, I'm not interested. And even though there's a lot of liars, falsifying their background, there's also a lot of smart people that have learned. I mean, let's face it, Brene Brown, Simon Sinek, there's lots and lots of speakers all over the internet that are telling people that your quality of life is dependent on your quality of where you work. And, Dying for a Paycheck, that book, people are smarter. They're more awake. They're more conscious to the energy, as you say, and as I say in the book, the energy of the place they work. And if it's a low energy, like high frustration, a lot of conflict, a lot of stress, people don't want to work there. It's just not a place where they want to give everything they can give. And so I would say for every 25 people that are falsifying their backgrounds blatantly, there's 25 people who are extraordinary, who are very discerning about where they're going to go to work. And then the other 50 people, 25, 100, the other 50 people are middle of the roaders. There's a little bit of lying going on, a little bit of exaggerating. Maybe they're not really clear on the kind of company they want to work for. So all in all, every organization should be looking at culture as a recruiting strategy. But you're saying something really interesting, and I think we should amplify it. You're saying an early canary in the coal mine for companies that boards of directors should have their fingers on is you're not getting the quality people because they smell something is rotten. There's like a smell factor. Like, how houses that smell don't sell. That's a famous line. Like if your house smells bad. In fact, these stagers will actually stage with cookie smells and whatnot to make the house really appealing. Yeah. If someone comes in for an interview, and I don't know if that's even happening in person anymore. It used to happen like in a law firm interview, law firms would interview people like 5 rounds. Like there'd be 5 rounds of interviewing. They have different people in different rounds. It was a big vetting process. These days, I don't even know if folks are doing that anymore. But if people are not accepting the offers, that's an early indicator that something is wrong. And it means that probably the company has a bigger cultural / management issue to deal with. That's really what you're saying, right? Yeah, and especially if they've interviewed and then turned down the job. What I hear a lot is, and somebody did a great meme on Facebook. They said the way the job is presented, and it was like this thoroughbred, but then when you get in, it was like a donkey, and people took offense to it. But that's real. I mean, that is so real. And it used to be where you would just hear about that at lunch. And
Right.
you'd overhear people complaining, but now it's social media. I mean, I'm sure you saw that social post of that girl that was getting laid off by Cloud something or other, and they laid her off and it went viral, and she recorded the entire layoff process, and
Wow.
it was
Ouch.
just awful
Ouch.
for her. That will come back and bite her. Little does she know now, but unless she's going to work for herself, that will bite her.
Right.
But it also bit the company. The way it was handled, that nobody knew why she was getting laid off. But the point is, everything is available. All information is available. And I would really look at how many interviews and then how many turned down, how many rejections are we getting, more so than how many candidates. Because if you're not getting candidates, that could very well be a recruitment issue, a lack of creativity. We're not pitching the job right. We're too narrow-minded. But if you're interviewing people and they're turning you down, you want to go back and look at their experience. And, even if it's on Zoom, you could smell, you call it smell, I call it energy. You could feel something on an interview on Zoom, what we're doing right now.
Right. Andrew, do you know of any tools that are trying to actually look at what I would call the smell factor and you call the energy factor? Are you guys doing that too? And because you recommend a lot of tools to your clients, right? Over at Hierarchy.
I do. So Margaret's right. It's an insight, so candidate experience is very important, but there's so many tools. But what's interesting about what you guys are talking about is, so they did a study on the three attributes of the most consistently most qualified people, or the best hires. And the number one characteristic is conscientiousness, followed closely by agreeability, followed closely by discipline. And those have nothing to do with how good of a coder you are. Anyways, but it's an inside job. Like if I'm hiring for diversity, if there's no veterans at the company as it sits, it doesn't matter how many veterans I hire. So brand is not something you create. It's something you uncover. So you guys are both right. If the company smells, I don't care how many Febreze little plugins you get, it's gonna come out sooner or later, and it's very, very costly. A bad hire, one bad apple will unravel the whole thing. That's why conscientiousness, agreeability, and discipline are so important.
So the Apple remark is interesting because on my mind is Apple's requiring its people to come back to the office at least, 3-4 days a week. Of course, in a law firm, it'd be like, come back, we'll let you take off Sundays, like instead of working 7 days a week, you work 6 days a week. But my old law firm, I won't go into the stories, but we used to work a lot of hours. I used to work a lot of hours. But let me just ask this. Tim Cook hasn't said the most important thing that really comes out of what both of you are saying, which is the reason we want people to go back to the office is culture requires that people mingle and connect, and that the energy has to be real in a meeting, even though it's frustrating, the commute is frustrating, the gas cost is frustrating, the parking is frustrating. But you have to give credit to the fact that the office environment exists for a reason, and it does generally promote culture, I think, in a way better than Zoom. And I'm a big believer in Zoom, but I also think we're losing a lot of culture, certainly in the law firm context, a lot of training, a lot of mentoring, because people don't want to go to an office anymore because they view the convenience factor as too important. And they think to themselves, I can somehow get the mentoring in some other way. But I don't think Tim Cook is using the right incentive structure to say, look, the Apple culture has to sustain, and it's only going to sustain in a really traditional or semi-traditional way. I think they are saying you can work at home a couple of days a week, but do you think there's any validity to that? Because clearly Apple's decided, and I assume another number of other creativity or creative bent companies will decide the same thing, right?
I think only time will tell, but my personal, so out of all my clients, everyone is working in the office, maybe a couple days at home, but the people who are making key decisions are in that office. 80% of the time.
Right.
I think what people don't understand is that word, the D word that Andrew used, the discipline. When left up to our own devices, we are our own worst enemy. We will cognitively scatter ourselves because we're all want a dopamine hit. Oh, let me just go check Facebook, or let me go make laundry, or let me do this, and we don't understand what's happening to our ability to focus. The other thing is, in organizations, they have to be really doubling down on what kind of environment are they creating there for people to actually experience the fulfillment of going to work. I have young people working for me. They don't have any idea who I am until they are in a room with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I bring them to events. I invite them to my house because I don't have an office anymore, because I'm never in one place.
Right.
But if I didn't bring people with me, they would not know who I am.
Right.
And the last thing I want to say is the Gen Zs and the younger millennials, they came into this gig of working, thinking free reign, I can work at home. And what they really don't realize is they are missing out on that socialization piece, that growing up and understanding how you pick things up on the fly, how you intuit, how you learn through osmosis. That doesn't happen over Zoom. And people like me who are high level producers, if you study flow and the Flow Research Collective, or even the 4-Hour Work Week, Tim Ferriss, we cannot spend all of our time on Zoom making sure people are getting what they need. There's got to be a two-way street.
Right.
Anyway, that's a very passionate point for me.
No, I think that I'll just say something about the courts, which is the courts find it very convenient, both federal and state, to just do everything on Zoom or Teams, depending on what court you're in. And they don't even want people showing up to the courthouse anymore. And the courthouse, in my book, is a place of discipline, and is a place where people have a certain sort of reverence. It's like going to church almost. The judge is there in the black robes on the bench. And the fact that they don't want to entertain that anymore, and the judges more or less want the convenience and the security of not having to deal with people, you got to let them in, you got to check them out for guns. I think the judges are changing the practice of law for young people in a way that's not necessarily good. And at some point, I'm sure I'll do some big conversation with hopefully some senior judges, because I think the senior judges agree that the result is the advocacy is not as good, and the quality of the thought process that gets across on Zoom is not as good. Now, there'll be counter arguments made left, right, and sideways, but the Supreme Court has decided to go back in session in full with people showing up in Washington, D.C. And I think that they're going to come away saying the traditional approach is the better approach compared to the 2 or 3 years that they did everything by phone and Zoom. And we'll see whether they comment and more or less convince these federal judges, who at the district court level at least are saying, we really just don't want to see people anymore if we can avoid it.
Human beings are social creatures. We need that socialization. But Andrew just put something in the chat, and he should share about that. Mm-hmm. I have a family member who works for Meta. He bought a house 400 miles away from his office. Now, what they do with him is they bring him in, I think, 1 week a month. And that's a better deal for him than having to relocate his family back to Silicon Valley. Although for me, I would be happy if they came back.
Yeah. So you think, Andrew, that it's pretty much here to stay, that this movement towards a more virtualization will be here to stay, right? That's really what your comment is, or your.
Well, I'm just pulling up statistics. 16% of companies operate fully remote. I have some clients that have no office.
Right.
16% of the companies right now are 100% remote, which I agree with what both of you are saying. It's how can there be a culture if no one's around each other? Margaret's right. We're communal creatures. We want to be around people. So how can you establish culture or brand if it's every man for themselves? But in this, 98% of workers want to work remote at least some of the time. 93% of employers plan to continue job interviews remotely. This is Forbes. This isn't my opinion.
Right.
And to your point, Jack, it varies by discipline. Like, nurses aren't going to be working from home.
Right. Well, and doctors and everyone that's in sort of the healing professions. I mean, dentists are absolutely having to work in an office, and real estate people want to get more dentists into their building because once they're there, they're sort of like locked in. But let's wrap up with this idea, which is, where does culture go in the 21st century if the statistics play out that it will be more virtual? Because clearly, if you believe the future of computing and the future of work, the view is that people are going to put on these glasses like the Apple Vision Pro, be in front of a computer, be immersed in multiple windows. No, seriously, I went to the Apple store to experience this thing. I'll save it for another podcast. It was a very, very funny interaction because the salesperson opened up with, "Do you know anything about spatial computing?" I said, "Well, Jaron Lanier came in my office and basically defined virtual reality." And, "Well, really?" And I said, "Well, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak came in my office, my old law firm, dead broke. Why didn't you start Apple Computer?" It's another long story. And the woman looked at me like, "Oh, so you know this area. What devices have you used?" I started listing all these devices I used as prototypes. She was like, I got to get a more senior person to help you because you know too much about this stuff." But it was funny because I looked at her and I said, this area has been around for like 40 years, but has failed. And now Apple wants to promote it. And I don't know if the Vision Pro will succeed. I'll save it for another time. But I have to tell you, that view of life is we're all going to be wearing goggles and we're going to plug in like it's, 2084. And it's going to be a different world. And I just don't know how culture will get transmitted in that world.
Well, here's what will happen. It will become remember the book by the founder of PayPal, and it was like, be the CEO of your own life.
Right.
I forget it, Maynard Webb or something like that.
Yeah.
And, he was saying back then, like every man for himself. The problem with every man for himself is not every man has the DNA to run their own business.
Right.
Not every man understands, or woman, and that's what I'm, human, has what it takes to be an entrepreneur. We've had a mass influx of new coaches. Everyone and their brother who cannot find a job is now an executive coach.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't want to talk to you unless you have a certification. Go do your own thing. I've got my niche. I hire great people, but we're all proven experts and we've made our place in the world. But what's going to happen, and this happened in the late 80s, it happened in the 90s, it happened in 2008, influx of intrapreneurs or solopreneurs. Mm-hmm. And about 80% of them wash out because people need people. Now I sound like I'm singing a song, but people need a place that they can go to. So I think people will use VR, but the truth is, we also are aesthetic human beings and we want nature. And so we're going to want to be in the outdoors. We're going to want to be with other people. And I think what I see happening and where I get brought in is more and more organizations are having these, instead of offsites, they're having onsites. They're bringing people in and paying a lot of money to have hundreds of people fly in for workshops, for retreats, so that they can be together. They can be collegial, and then they'll go off, and then they'll have smaller. I also think we're going to have smaller work teams in regions. Like, the Santa Barbara group is going to get together every Tuesday and Wednesday, and the Marin group is going to get together every blah, blah, and blah, blah. I think there's going to be a lot more effort on logistics and connecting people, because if we make everybody come in, we're going to lose all our distance employees. And I don't think if you're a peak performer that the company's going to want to let you go.
Right. So, Andrew, do you want to make some comments on what you think happens culturally? Because you do the technology side, but the truth is the technology side's got to transfer to the best hires and the best hires staying, right? That's the real metric here, isn't it?
Yeah, the technology is a means to an end. I think what I'm seeing is as administering that talent acquisition leadership council, everyone's saying, well, so what's the best practice? Is it hybrid? Is it return to work? And what's interesting is the millennials, the younger people, the leadership there's a few clients that are like, hey, you got to come in. I don't care what your situation is. You are coming in at least 4 days. And that's an edict. It's a mandate from the top down. Whereas other companies like, hey, if you're doing your job, I don't care if you're in your bathrobe, in the bathroom doing it. As long as you're doing it, if I'm a coder and I have Asperger's or autism, I'm not going to fit in even if I go into the office. So
yeah.
It really just depends. But it starts at the top and everyone's kind of, well, what's everyone else doing? Right, wrong, or indifferent? So I think that, Margaret, you made a good point. It's just going to find its own way. But at the end of the day, people do want to be around people. And so I like that on-site, off-site. Because, man, some of these companies have so many off-sites because there's no on-site. So why don't we just come to work a few days a week? And there's your offsite, which is an onsite. So there's no rhyme or reason. It starts at the top. And again, it depends on the company. It depends on the leadership and the discipline.
So let's wrap up by giving a big round of applause to Margret Graziano for getting the Ignite Culture book out and rolling the marketing out in a bigger way.
I want a signed copy of those 61 ratings. At least 30 of those are me.
No, they're all genuine. And I have to say, Margret, you take on a tough topic because culture is very intangible and it's very, very challenging for people to get their arms around. It's like charisma. It's very hard to say whether someone is or isn't charismatic, and are they charismatic in a positive way, like Obama was, or Steve Jobs was, or in a negative way, like Steve Jobs was some of the time, and like Donald Trump is most of the time, or Putin is most of the time. Like it's a hard thing to measure, but it exists, and people know it when they see it. And you know good culture when you see good culture, and you know bad culture when you see it. So you're highly recommended. The book is highly recommended. I'm going to get the Audible version tonight just to be able to listen to your voice as I ride my bike. And I'm going to recommend to everyone that I talk to, Andrew, you should get the Audible version so you can do it while you're lifting weights and doing your push-ups and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's an interesting thing because everyone should eventually do a book that really is something that gets them on the TED stage. And I hope this gets you on the TED stage, Margret. I hope this happens.
Thank you.
You would love that. So congratulations. Thank you for coming on. Thank you, Andrew, for joining. It's been fun. We'll do it again. And I'll tell the stories about the Apple Vision Pro and have you guys crack up. We'll do one that's like stand-up comedy. It was just so
cool. We should do stand-up comedy.
It's perfect. It's perfect. It's exactly the authenticity that I love. So thank you for doing it, guys. Talk to you later.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.